I'd like to just start by acknowledging Mrs. Reichardt's family and friends who first of all shared with us someone so special, your wife, your mother, grandmother, sister, Anne, who gave so much to TABC for so many years. And the opportunity to try to express our respect, our gratitude, really will be insufficient. We appreciate joining us really to give proper respect and honor to a person who never asked for honor, but who was certainly deserving of so much respect. So everyone understands a sense of what to expect. We're going to hear from a student, Ben Reish, an alum, Seth Meza, Mrs. Silverman, Mrs. Lopkin, and then we'll have a siyum by Cary Reichardt and Yaakov Beda, followed by a Sudas Mitzvah to celebrate the siyum in memory of Mrs. Reichardt, that we'll all say brachos in her memory and enjoy. I think what Mrs. Reichardt always brought was a sense of festivity, and so it'll be pizza afterwards in the basketball gym. While we've lost someone so special, Shemayim is a brighter place because wherever Mrs. Reichardt was, she brought spirit and she brought energy. She infused the room, classroom 1, with her charisma, positivity, creativity, and passion. Her infectious attitude impacted her students, her colleagues, and her friends for over 25 years at TABC. I'm honored to stand here today really representing the thoughts and feelings of TABC faculty, her students, and thousands of alumni and their families who have been deeply impacted by Mrs. Cary Reichardt. And for students who are here, freshmen, sophomores, who did not have the pleasure, did not have the privilege to have Mrs. Reichardt, it's our hope that listening to stories of her, understanding who she was, and how she taught our students much more than history, economics, culinary arts, or Holocaust studies. She taught our students how to live a life driven by mission and sensitivity to others. She infused within each student an appreciation of his value and what he is capable of achieving. In Parshas Vayera, which admittedly, I wrote this at the time of Cary's Patira, we read about the life of Avram Avinu. We explore the picture that's painted of Avram. We learn about a person who's not just interested in his own growth, but someone who cares deeply about society, about humanity, about justice, and about the well-being of others. Although Avram Avinu in Parshas Vayera recently underwent a bris milah, a medical procedure, he sits at the entrance to his tent, not focused on himself, but instead focused on the travelers who look hungry and thirsty. The Parsha continues, and we read about Avram's reaction to the news that Hashem was going to destroy Sodom. Rather than accept the news, Avram speaks up in his advocacy and compassion for humanity. Avram lives his life with purpose, with leadership, with social justice, with care, with sensitivity, and constantly directs his attention to everyone else. There could not be a better description of Mrs. Reichardt. She lived with purpose, she led, she cared deeply about others, she advocated, and she impacted the world. As her students know, she was especially passionate about Holocaust education. The respect and sensitivity she had and displayed constantly to the previous generation was evident in the way she spoke about and cared for the survivors. Simultaneously, her commitment to Holocaust studies was fueled by her desire to ensure that never again means never again, and that future generations would never forget the atrocities of the Holocaust. She beamed with pride when she would bring her students to a program for Holocaust survivors, and her students would follow her lead and treat these survivors with respect and admiration, because those are the lessons that she imparted on them. And her students would always rise to the occasion because of the deep and profound respect that they had for Mrs. Reichardt. There are teachers who demand respect, and there are teachers who earn respect. For over 25 years, Mrs. Reichardt earned the respect and admiration of her students because she believed in them. And as anyone here who was her student and alumni who are watching know, they knew the respect that she had for them. I remember during one of my first years at TABC, there was a group of students who many faculty members found to be challenging in terms of classroom management, but not Mrs. Reichardt. Well ahead of her time, she had this class create a wax museum showing off what they'd learned in the United States about various decades. And she cajoled all of us as she would. She had this way of making sure everyone did exactly what she needed. And she brought us into, it was at the time, it was right across from the main office, what's now the faculty room. And we went in, and each of these students, as challenging as they could be in class, shined. They were amazing. And they brought their decade into life. This group took their project seriously, and their wax museum amazed us all. They rose to the occasion because they knew how much Mrs. Reichardt cared about them and believed in them. I want to share a quote with you from a student in her culinary arts class in one of the many times that her work appeared in an article in a Jewish newspaper. Start quote, "Mrs. Reichardt has taught me so much, not just about cooking, but about being a mensch," end quote. And I think that's who Mrs. Reichardt is, and I think that's what she taught us. To close, if I could share one brief message with Mrs. Reichardt's family, she taught us much. One of the things she taught us was what family means and the important role they play, despite all of the busyness around us. She often expressed to us how blessed she was to have the best family, a devoted and wonderful family. I lack the words to describe the pride she had when she discussed each of her children, each of her grandchildren, her husband, her brother, her sister-in-law, who I know is like a sister to her, and all of your children. You treated her with such love and care, and she would share that with us with pride. We hope you take comfort in knowing that, and in knowing that Mrs. Reichardt changed the lives of each of us sitting here, and again, the many, many alumni who have joined us at various times and are watching online, because she impacted them and subsequently their children. And we take comfort in knowing that since Mrs. Reichardt was a fighter, a passionate advocate, and so proud of our alumni who went on to serve in Tzahal, her love and her concern now takes, that which always took place in the classroom, will now take place in the classroom in Shamayim, where we know she is a Melitz Yosher for all of us, but specifically for the safety of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Tehei nishmasa tzura b'tzur ha'chayim. And now it's our privilege to hear from Senior Ben Reish.
I would like to start off by saying thank you to Rabbi Khan for giving me the opportunity to speak about Ms. Reichardt. I'd also like to thank her family for giving us the opportunity to commemorate her Shloshim and TABC, a place she dedicated her life to. I'm not going to talk about how much we miss Ms. Reichardt because it's very obvious, and we can see that within the last 30 days. I'm going to talk about Ms. Reichardt in a way that celebrates her. I truly cannot put into words about how big of an impact Mrs. Reichardt had not only made on my life, but everyone who knew her as well. Everyone who was lucky enough to have Mrs. Reichardt knew that she truly cared about you on a personal level and not just as your teacher. She put care and work into each specific student, even though she was teaching half the school. Last year was my first year having Ms. Reichardt. I did not know the type of teacher I was getting. I didn't know that I was going to get a teacher that truly wants me to thrive in school and life. Being in all lower classes throughout high school, I rarely had a teacher who challenged me so much at the same time, making class so thrilling and joyful. An example that comes to mind when talking about how Mrs. Reichardt made her classes exciting is the Great Gatsby party. Mrs. Reichardt told us that she always talked about how much she loved the Great Gatsby and how she couldn't wait for us to get to the book because of how much we'll enjoy it. When we got to the book, she told us that she was having a surprise for us. She told us that we needed to dress up as a certain famous person from that time period, and she'll handle everything else. She spent all day cooking food for us, setting up, and she was trying to make the party as enjoyable as possible for everyone. She put so much care and effort into that party. You don't do that unless you truly care and love what you're doing and who you're doing it for. When Mrs. Reichardt got sick, everyone was emailing her and making signs for her. When Mrs. Reichardt and I were emailing while she was sick, she was still checking up on me and the rest of the students to make sure that we were getting our work done. Everyone cared so much about Mrs. Reichardt because of how much she cared about us and the joy she brought to going to school every day. Something that comes to mind when talking about how much Mrs. Reichardt cared about us, even after you were graduated and when you were no longer a student, is that she would always ask about my brother after he graduated. Mrs. Reichardt wasn't just your teacher, she was also your friend. Thank you to everyone for listening to me today.
We ask alumnus Seth Mesa to please come up forward.
My name is Seth Mesa. I graduated TBC in 2019. After switching into TBC in 10th grade, I had Ms. Reichardt for all 3 remaining years of high school. I had her for U.S. history for 2 years and Holocaust studies with the inaugural play with Mrs. Lopkin in 12th grade. I remember that I didn't pay attention much in most classes during my time in TABC, but the one class that I did pay attention in, I vividly remember taking notes every single day, was Mrs. Reichardt's class. So upon reflecting, why was it that during Mrs. Reichardt's class, no other class I could really be cracked, so to speak, why in Mrs. Reichardt's class was I able to really pay attention, really feel motivated, and really feel involved. So one midah that I think I would like to highlight is Mrs. Reichardt's midah of consistency. The way that we would walk into class every single day would be as follows. We'd walk in, sit down, and as we were sitting down, Mrs. Reichardt would be writing the terms of the day on the board. She did this every single day, and I think that as a student, that actually helped me feel a sense of safety and feel like this teacher is very clear, and Ms. Reichardt was very clear about what she was expecting of us. And I think that really, at the end of the day, was what allowed me to really feel like I was cared for, and really allowed me to feel very involved in her class. As 12th grade came along, I knew I would definitely take Mrs. Reichardt for Holocaust studies. And I remember that we got to the class one day and she told us she had a surprise for us. She told us that we would be interviewing a number of Holocaust survivors, and then we would be putting on a play about their stories. This was something that was very surprising for all of us, and it took us a little bit to buy in to that being something that we'd really be excited about. But again, day in and day out, with Ms. Reichardt's consistency, we were able to really build a bond that I don't think any other class has really built with Mrs. Reichardt. And we were able to, the public saw the play that we put on at the end, but the day in, day out, each and every day of us practicing our lines and us, Mrs. Reichardt really genuinely caring about the play and the project as a whole, but also caring about each and every single one of us. One example is that Mrs. Reichardt asked each and every one of us how it is we wanted to contribute to the play. For someone like me who liked playing music, Mrs. Reichardt thought it would be fitting for me to play the piano and write the score for the play. And there was another kid in the class that was very good with art. And Mrs. Reichardt decided that he would be the one that would make all the backdrops for the play. And those that were the actors really felt like this was something that not only was really meaningful, but they made it their own. And I think Mrs. Reichardt was at the center point of one of my most meaningful moments in high school, and I think a lot of alumni can say the same. Thank you.
Mrs. Silverman and Mrs. Lopkin are going to speak and also share an initiative we're going to start.
everyone. Those of you who may not have had me, or those of you family members I don't know, I'm Mrs. Silverman, Ossie Silverman. This is my 28th year in TABC, and I'm only saying that because there are only a handful of people, a very small part of a handful of people here longer than me, and Mrs. Reichardt was one of them. So I'm just going to say three quick things. Ms. Lopkin's going to say quick, and then we're going to really talk about this initiative that we're all here as a group going to be working on for the next little while. Three things. Most of what I wanted to say has been said, so I'm not going to be redundant about that. Mrs. Reichardt was probably the most, Seth said consistent, also persistent person that I knew in terms of getting things done. Sometimes when I want to get something done and I get a no and I back away, she never backed away. The strength that she had, and we can smile because everything I think for every one of us, you should think of what is your best feature is probably a little bit of what, sometimes we'll, get angst of people, but this persistency didn't matter. It didn't matter. She wanted to get this culinary arts class. She wanted to infuse Jewish history into food, which is how she ran her class. It was not just let's go make cookies like you do in cooking in camp or decorate. This was learning about Persia and the Jewish history of Persia and cooking Persian food and learning, and she was going to get that done. It didn't matter that they got rid of the oven in the school. She was going to make it work. And it didn't matter that the auxiliary lunchroom where she was teaching was triple booked. It didn't matter. She was going to make it work, and that class was going to happen. And actually, in the last couple of weeks when I was going through with the stuff on her desk for her family to come get, and I saw that white coat that she wore every day of culinary arts, to me, I know that the Holocaust was her passion, but I just saw her, how she lit up walking into the teacher's room with the shirayim of whatever she cooked for the rest of us to taste. And that was really, to me, that was her. And I'll just say one more quick thing, is that we shared an office for the last 3 years, that was it. And for her to still be making lesson plans, all of you that had her, she worked for every single lesson. She's teaching 30-something years, every single lesson from scratch. There was no winging it. So work hard at what you do and put new into every year, and that's just who she was to me.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mrs. Lopkin, Director of Performing Arts. So in my title, it's clear that I'm not a history teacher. That's not something that I studied, although I am passionate about history. It's not something that is normally in my forte. And 6 years ago, for those of you who don't know, Mrs. Reichardt approached me and she said, and I was thinking about a way, I want to really get the students engaged in Holocaust studies, and meanwhile she had been teaching Holocaust studies already for many years, and she was always looking for new ways for her students to connect to the material, and she was thinking about it, and she thought, could we collaborate together? Could we create something unique that would bring theater and the Holocaust studies together, maybe bring it to life in a way that the students could really own and connect to personally? So she and I sat down and took a summer to brainstorm and plan for what became the Bear Witness Project, which has since morphed over time, and Seth Meza did an amazing job explaining that year one. So I'm not going to go into the details of that. And the students who are in the class now, you heard a little bit of insight as to what's coming up, but we will be doing a version of the project, which will, again, take a little bit of a different spin this coming year. It's very strange to come into classroom 1 every day and teach Holocaust studies without my Holocaust studies teacher. And it's really been very eye-opening to me to sort of understand the depth of her knowledge in that subject, because you can do some research and put together a PowerPoint and talk about some points, but it was just a part of who she was. She just was so ingrained with all of the details and the dates and the facts and the figures and the players that I could never in a million years do her justice. And I'm just humbled by the fact that I got to teach alongside her for so many years. And when we were discussing, like, how could we possibly, remember her in a way that would in any way do her justice? So we thought, well, why don't we come up with a campaign that has multiple prongs? Because as you've heard and there were so many different things that Mrs. Reichardt was passionate about, that she loved, that she cared about. So we came up with this three-prong plan. Do, give, remember. We're now going to introduce to you briefly what each of the components will look like and how you will all have an opportunity to participate. Okay, so at the end of the week, you'll be receiving a letter with a Google form, and you'll be able to sign up and join this initiative. And people online, of course, you'll be able to as well. So the do component. We're going to ask everybody who chooses to participate to select some type of mitzvah that you want to take upon yourself, for a given period of time. For example, if you're somebody who is passionate about learning but hasn't had a chance to delve into, I don't know, one of the Nevi'im that we don't cover in school, or you want to look at Kohelet or something like that, you're going to sort of select what you want to focus on for the time period that you want to focus on it. If you're somebody who has not had a lot of opportunities to maybe donate your time, so maybe you're going to select that you're going to babysit for your neighbors, or it can be really any kind of way that you're giving back or that you're digging deep into a mitzvah of any kind. Maybe you want to commit greater kavana when you're davening at mincha. It could be a number of things, something that you feel like you want to connect to, and you're going to fill it out on this Google form, and we're going to keep track of what you've signed up to do, and that'll be, we're going to have this whole long list, sort of an ongoing list, and that will be connected to the remember piece. And we're going to introduce you the give piece, and then I'll go back and talk about the remember piece.
Okay, well, we're not really talking about the give piece. We're just going to tell you that there is going to be a give piece. There is going to be some kind of fundraising campaign to dedicate something. It's still in the works, and it'll be at some point in the second semester. So we're putting that on hold, but it will all culminate. All of this will culminate at the same time, because the remember piece, should I keep going? You want to keep going?
All right, so the remember piece is, just like you heard the speakers come up and say some memories or stories that they have with Mrs. Reichardt or about Mrs. Reichardt, I'm sure so many of us, whether you're on Zoom or in this room right now, have a story like that you want to share with the family. So part of the Google document that you're going to have access to, the Google form, there'll be a place where you can write in that story. And we're going to compile everything, along with, hopefully we'll have some amazing photos through the years, into a lovely book that will have all of these memories, and also the list of all of the do's that everybody has chosen to take upon themselves. And as the culminating event to this whole initiative, we'll be presenting the family with copies of the books so that they can have them and always be connected to their TABC family.
Obviously, this is all voluntary, but we really hope that we have a lot of participation in all three of these prongs, or for sure on the two that we are initiating this week.
Thank you. The last part is we are going to make a museum. Just before that, I want to acknowledge faculty members from past tenures here at TABC who have joined us, who I know had a closeness with Mrs. Reichardt. So nice to have you back. Cary, Mrs. Reichardt's oldest son, will start the museum.
First off, on behalf of my family, I'd like to say thank you for TABC for hosting this event. TABC really was home away from home for our mother, and it really was amazing to see the amount of students, former students, and faculty that came to tell us the stories about their experiences with our mother, and it was really special. And so, on behalf of our family, we want to say thank you. The last Seder in Mrs. mistaken, is called Horayot. And Horayot is basically, mainly discusses what happens when the Sanhedrin makes a mistake. And what kind of korbans you offer and everything like that. What korbans you offer when the Sanhedrin makes a mistake, when you can rely upon it when you can. The last Mishnah says, Kohen Kodem Levi, Levi L'Yisrael, Yisrael L'Mamzer, Mamzer L'Natzin, Natzin L'Ger, Ger L'Eved, Mishafar. It says, first is a Kohen, in terms of priority, then comes a Levi, then comes a Yisrael, then comes a Mamzer, then comes a Natzin, which is some descendant of Gibeonite that tricked Yeshua into converting. Afterwards a Ger, convert, and then after an Eved Mishafar, which is a freed slave. In terms of the priority, they're talking about if they're captives, of who you go and redeem first, or if people need help, who you help first. Ematai, Bizman Shaku on Shabbat. When does this apply? When everyone is considered equal. Aval in Hayom Mamzer Talmud Chacham, the Kohen Gadol Amaretz, Mamzer Talmud Chacham Kodem, the Kohen Gadol Amaretz. This applies, this priority applies only when everyone's on equal footing. If you happen to have, though, a Mamzer who's a Talmud Chacham, more than the Kohen, then that Mamzer goes to the top of the list. Basically saying that, it's not a title that's determinative of the quality of a person, it's actually the quality of the person. And I believe that's a pretty fitting mission to end with respect to my mom, because, to my mom, she didn't necessarily care what your title was, she cared what kind of person you were. And so, that's how it's safer as he can end.
Yaakov Beda. Yaakov is going to make the Hadron and then follow to the Hadron.
Datan Allah Seder Nezikin, Moed Benashim, Vedatach Aman, Lo Nit Neshem Minach Seder Nezikin, Moed Benashim, Lo Tit Neshem Minach, Lo Ba'ama Hadin, Lo Ba'ama Da'ateh. Harem Na Adonai Eloheinu, Et Divrei Toratecha, Befinu Befiot Amcha Beit Yisrael, V'niyeh Kulanu, Anachnu, V'tzetzeinu, V'tzetzei Amcha Beit Yisrael, Kulanu Yodei Shemecha, V'lamdei Toratecha Lishma, V'ravai Techach Menu Mini Mitzvotecha Ki Lolan Hi Li Hi Libi Tamid Bechukecha Laman Lo Evosh Lolam Lo Eshkach Pekudecha Ki Bam Chayitani Baruch Ata Adonai Lamdenu Chukecha Amen 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 Sela Va'ed Modim Anachnu Lach Lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Shesanta Chalkenu Miyoshvei Beit HaMidrash ולא מיושבי קרנות. שעת שאנו משכימים והם משכימים. אנו משכימים לדברי תורה והם משכימים לדברים בטלים. אנו עמלים והם עמלים. אנו עמלים ומקבלים שכר. והם עמלים ואינם מקובלים שכר. אנו רצים והם רצים. אנו רצים לחיי העולם הבא והם רצים לבאר שחר. שנאמר, ואתה אלוהים תורידם לבאר שחר. אנשי דמים ומרמה לא יחצו ימיהם ואני אבטח בך. יהי רצון לפניך, אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים סדר נזיקין מועד ונשים. כך תעזרני להתחיל סדרים וספרים אחרים ולסיימם. ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. וזכות כל התנאים ותלמידי חכמים הנזכרים בסדר נזיקין מועד ונשים. תעמוד לי ולזרי, שלא תמוש התורה מפי זרי וזרע זרי עד עולם. וקוים בי והתהלכך מנחה אותך בשכבך תשמור עליך והקיצותה כי תשכיחה כי בירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים. אורך ימים בימינה ושמאלה אשר בכבוד. אדוני עוז עמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
יקדל יקדש שמי רבה. ואמרתי הוא עתיד לעתידתה ולאחיה ומיתיה L'asaka Yalta Chaya Alma, L'mibne Karta Di Yerushalayim, L'shchala Hechla Begava, L'mekar Pachana, L'chra Min Ara, L'atava Pachana Dishmaya L'atay, Yavlit Kedusha Brichu, L'malchutei V'Ikari, V'chaychon, V'yomachon, V'chaydachol B'Yisrael, Yisrael, V'galav Zmakariv V'imru Amen. Yesh Mirab Barak, L'amamei Amaya, Yiparach, Yishtabach, Yipar, V'tormam, V'naseh, V'dadar, V'talev, V'talal, Shmit, V'chab, V'chur. Leila Mikol Rechata, V'shirata, Tishmechata, V'nachamata, Damiram, V'amad, V'imru Amen. All Yisrael, V'ravana, V'al-Talmidehom, V'al-Kol Talmidei, Talmidei, V'al-Kol Man Tasek, V'yareita, V'vatar, Hadim, V'chil, Chalatar, V'atar. Yehila Hono, V'shlama Rabba, V'chin, V'chista, V'rachim, V'chayin, V'rikin, V'zonu, V'riche, V'forkin, V'mikadon, V'shmaya, V'arav, V'imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba, V'shemaya, V'chayin, Tov, V'malim, V'al-Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom, V'imru Amav, V'barachamav, Yaseh Shalom, Amin, V'al-Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen.
Once again, we thank the Reichardt family for sponsoring pizza dinner. There's pizza in the basketball gym. We ask everyone, 1 second, guys, we ask everyone, there's more than enough.